Okay, well, hopefully everybody can see that slide selection of woody ornamentals. And this is going to be a really exciting presentation. I'm just kidding. It's not that exciting. But hopefully it will give you some good ideas about, excuse me, it'll give you some good ideas about what to plant in different areas of your garden, sunny, shady, wet, dry, all of that. And I'm going to try not to spend a ton of time on each of these plants because there's a lot of different plants in here. But again, this will be recorded. This is being recorded right now. And I will post it at the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel. There'll be a QR code on the last page. You can take a look there. And if you want to watch it again or go take a closer look at one particular slide, you can do that. If you want a copy of the slide deck in PDF form, you can always reach out via email, and I'm happy to provide that. All right, so most people here are probably admitted garden lovers and landscape lovers, and that is, something that adds value to your home. Some of us maybe are in brand new houses and subdivisions that don't have a whole lot of interest to them, and it's like a blank slate. So there's a lot of work and love that you can put into the home that you're in. And, some people here maybe just are kind of don't know what to do and, you know, are looking for some ideas, and that's fine too. There's all sorts of reasons why you might be here. And we are here to kind of help you with that and give you some ideas. So basically, kind of looking at this is a brand new presentation. So sorry if I'm not like really into it. It's very new to me. And so I'm going to try to get through it and give you some really good information. But anyway, just kind of bear with me and we'll get there together. All right. So you'll probably recognize this as maybe what I would consider kind of an old English garden. So there's a lot of different styles of gardens. There's very old foundation type gardens, woodland gardens, sunny perennial gardens, all sorts of stuff. And, you know, most people are probably going to want something relatively simple that doesn't require a ton of time to be invested in them. Some people might be willing to put in the time to get something like this. This is the Founders Garden on the UGA campus. Requires a lot of work. So you can see here a boxwood hedge. Many of you are probably familiar with boxwood blight that is now in the area. It's kind of working its way through. We still do have some boxwoods in the area. They require a lot of intervention. We'll just put it that way. So in some of the older parts of Atlanta, you can still find houses that have beautiful gardens like this, and they pay a lot of money to have landscape companies come out and take care of their boxwoods. But they have a lot of money invested in that garden and then the house. You're probably talking a multi-million-dollar house. So, that's hardly anything when you're comparing that. But they still need maintenance. They need a lot of maintenance. So if that's not something that you're looking for and you kind of want that wild and free look, you'll probably be looking for something else. So you can also consider something like a conservation type planting. Um, Here you have a really, really, really old tree. Probably, could be 1,000 years old. I remember being out in Colorado and we went on a hike, and there were some trees like this that were, uh, yeah, I think there was a sign that said one was like 4,000 years old. So that's pretty impressive. And, it's saving and trying to keep trees, plants, those kinds of things, heritage plants for the next generation. So it's a labor of love in a situation like this. So, Are you going to have a house that you buy that's going to have something like this in it? Probably not, but you might. So, it's important to kind of, I guess, formulate a plan when it comes to moving into a new house and what you're going to do with the shrubbery, the trees, the plants, all the flowers that are there. Are you going to keep them? Are you going to get rid of them? You have to kind of have a plan. So obviously, most people are going to know or think they know that native plants that are adapted to our particular climate. So we're in the Piedmont region of Georgia, here in and around the Atlanta area. We here in Gwinnett County, there may be some folks that are outside Gwinnett County. Most of us over here are in zone 8 now, formerly 7B, roughly about the same, not much difference. So this particular um, presentation is going to be kind of geared towards what's going to be best for this particular region of Georgia. We'll also probably talk about introduced or exotic plants and whether they're all bad. Some people really, really believe that natives are the only plants that we should plant. And that's not necessarily so. I mean, if that's your choice, that's perfectly fine. And you are definitely welcome to do that. But there are other plants out there, non-natives, that work just fine in gardens here. We have a lot of things from over in China, Japan, Asia, just in general, that it's the same zone over there roughly, and they do really well, sometimes a little too well. But generally speaking, native and exotic plants can be used together, and that's perfectly fine. They do really well. We just don't want to exclude one or the other. Like don't all use all exotics or all, feel free to get some natives in there too, because obviously we're kind of in the back of our head. I'm always thinking about pollinators, and you always want to try to have something available for them because they're here and they still need to eat. And so why not plant something in your landscape that's going to be good for them as well? So here's some examples of plants that can be used together, native and exotic. You just have to kind of, I guess, decide where you're going to put them. So this is in Pine Mountain, Georgia, down by Callaway Gardens. So if any of you've been down there, it's very beautiful in the spring. Actually, it's beautiful all year round. This is the azalea bowl, and both are going to be here. You'll see that. I don't know if you can quite see the detail, but they do have some Asian azaleas, and then there's also deciduous native azaleas. We'll talk a little bit more about the deciduous native azaleas later, but they're interplanted. So you get that really cool variety, both in color and in leaf structure and plant structure. Native azaleas tend to be more rambling. They're deciduous, so they tend to bloom first, and then you'll have the leaves second, whereas the Asian azaleas are evergreen. And you just have different bloom colors. So the Asian, you'll have purples and pinks and whites and kind of reds and things like that. And then with the natives, you'll get yellows and pinks and reds and whites and orange, beautiful orange. So just definitely a good idea. I know I have both in my landscape. I have a lot of both and I enjoy them. They're one of my favorite flowers. So this basically talks about the Southern Living headquarters, and they kept the vegetation as best as they could. So a lot of times, if you're in the real estate world or you're talking about conservation LEED certified buildings, one of the things that you can do for that, and that's LEED, and that's kind of an environmental way to look at building, is they try to minimize and or enhance environmental protections when those buildings are being built. So here you can see they only remove the trees in the footprint of the building, which is awesome. I live in a subdivision where basically they did the same thing. They only removed the trees immediately where the house was built, and they left all of the rest of them around. So I am in a forest situation. Occasionally I'll do a presentation from my back porch, and it's like being in a tree house, and it definitely saves a lot in energy. I can tell you, power bill is a lot less than what it would be if I was in a brand new subdivision in the middle of summer, someplace with no trees. So you can kind of get an idea of what conservation means to that business by the dedication they put into it. So these are some heritage plants, I guess, that have been introduced, and we've been planting for hundreds of years. Some of you may have kind of assumed, rightly or wrongly, that these were natives, and they're not. So the English boxwoods are the ones that are on their way out here. Rosa Sharon, dogwood, the English dogwood, rose, lilacs, lime trees, pyracantha, 1600 to 1699. That's a long time ago. And you have in the 1700s, Norway maple, horse chestnut, mulberries, dwarf boxwood, English ivy, English holly, crepe myrtles, China berries, and another big down on the China berry. In the English yew, and then in the on into the 1850s, Japanese maples, yay. Mimosas, I have one of those, and now the neighborhood has mimosas, camellias, flowering quince, batsias, ginkgos, honeysuckles, nandinas, pyrrhus, weeping willows, and arborvitae. So you can see a lot of these plants have been around for a really long time, and some people would just consider them almost native here because they've been around for so long. But they obviously do well in Georgia because they're still here. So Cherokee rose, this is the state flower of Georgia. It's pretty vigorous. But is it native? Not really. Southern China and Burma. So that's kind of funny. You think that they would have picked something that was actually native to Georgia, but they did not. So maybe someday they'll actually choose a different flower. But for now, it is what it is, right? And you have the Georgia Gold Medal program. So this chooses annuals, perennial shrubs, trees, and vines, things that are going to be pretty easy to take care of, adapt in a very wide range of growing conditions, easy to find, non-invasive, and lots of interest, both spring, summer, fall, winter, that kind of thing. So these are going to be plants that they're trying to promote for the use in landscape. All right, so most of you are probably going to know what botanical or scientific names are. If you go into a nursery and you look at a tag, so let's say you go into Big Box or Walmart, you look at the tag, they're probably not going to get really fancy on you. They might tell you the variety of tomato you're buying, and they'll probably tell you the common name of what things are, but they're not going to get too into it. When you start getting some of the more specialized plants, Southern Living, Monrovia, some of those, they'll come out with brand new plants every year, lots of genetic manipulations going on behind the scenes, new plants coming in all the time. They want the newest and the best and the coolest things that are out there. So this is just to let you know kind of how that works if you're not really into that. But you have genus, species, and then variety and cultivar. Cultivar is going to be that newest type of, let's say, barberry or whatever. Here you have Rose Glow is going to be your cultivar. So that's going to be usually trademarked. So that's something that someone created, in other words, or bred in the nursery industry. And so that's going to be your fancy name. And Sangokaku would be, I believe that's a Japanese maple, but the botanical name is going to include all four parts there. And so that's just a little background on what that means if you look at a tag and you see that. And common names. So those are going to be the ones that most people are going to talk about when you're talking to anybody about what a plant is. We try in the scientific community to talk about not using common names because there are a lot of different plants out there that might share a common name. So if we want to be 100% certain we know what we're talking about, we're going to use the scientific name. So like for instance, tulip tree and yellow poplar, same thing, Liliodendron tulipifera. So tulip tree, Japanese magnolia, saucer magnolia, magnolia soliange. So you can see there could be one plant that has 6 names, depending on what region you're in and who you talk to. All right, so let's move on to landscape issues. So a big thing that a lot of developers have never learned, and that is proper spacing and mature size of plants. So if you live in a brand spanking new subdivision somewhere out there in the metro area in Gwinnett or otherwise, and you have landscape plantings, they're probably too close together. That's just a given. Those plants are going to grow over time. And 10 years from now, you might be calling us up and going, so what should I do here? Should I rip everything out and start from scratch? Or is there something else I can do? And there are things that you can do. But ultimately, we would love to see developers, landscapers actually planting these plants together in trying to assume what their mature size is going to be so that they're properly spaced and they're not going to be clustered together and have lots of problems with disease. So it can be a problem later on, but again, those people will be long gone, and so it's your problem. So if you're going to do anything in your landscape, before you do anything, or even if you're working with a landscape designer, make sure that you understand what the proper spacing and mature size of those particular plants are going to be. Even dwarf ones, note that those are just slower growing and they're still going to attain a larger size. So you can see here, it looks a little sad, doesn't it? Yeah. I just laugh sometimes when I see these pictures. They look pretty sad right now, but some of these are going to be considerably, if they ever grow to that size, they're struggling here. But they're going to grow together in one big mass and they're going to look really sad and just like a big blob. And then you end up with disease issues, plants that just look really horrible, and you have to go back and rehab the landscape. So lelands, a lot of people still plant lelands. I have them on my property. They're very short-lived trees with respect to how big they are, but they're very fast growing. So a lot of people will go ahead and put them in as hedgerows if they have a neighbor that they don't like. They grow really tall, 70 to 100 feet. So, and they grow fast, but really they only maybe 30 years is, the outward lifespan for one of these. But most people will put them together really close. And so we get a lot of people that will send us pictures and say, hey, my trees look bad. What's going on? And they've basically maxed out wherever they've put them. I've seen them smooshed in between 2 driveways in 3 foot of space, and they wonder why their trees are dying. So between the heat island effect and the fact that they have these huge trees in a tiny little space, they look bad and they're going to go into decline. So keep in mind at 70 to 100 feet tall, you're going to want to put a spread of about 20 foot between each tree. That's a lot. And most people, when you're trying to find a hedge, is not what you're looking for. You want something that's ready-made. Take into effect also that lelands have all sorts of issues with disease and insects and things like that. And there are other options that you might want to consider. So the right plant, right place. I know a lot of you have heard that before, and we talk about that all the time. So make sure you're getting the right plant in the right place. So here you have a lot of brick that's going to magnify the sun, reflect that back. It's a heat sink. So whatever you plant here in this picture has to be able to tolerate that. These are azaleas. Most people would not know. They would just look at the bloom and say, oh, isn't that pretty? Azaleas aren't real happy in hot and southern sunny exposures. So they might be able to limp along, but they're not going to live their full lifespan. They're not going to get to the full size that they should be, and they're certainly not going to be happy. You're going to get dieback, and they're going to go into decline and die. So the next time around, after they die, then you might want to consider some plants that can tolerate more sun, more heat, and have I guess, a better, they're better situated for a garden that has these particular conditions. All right, problems from the improper site. So things you might see in your garden if you're having problems. These are important, so keep these in mind. You're going to have poor or weak growth. You might have stretching. So maybe you have a knockout rose that's planted in a shady location and it's very sparse. There's not a lot of vegetation. Maybe the few branches that you have are stretching one way or the other. And so it's going to look really sad. And that's just because it's not in its optimal growing conditions. You're going to have increased disease and insect problems. Whenever you have a plant that's not happy with its location and it's struggling, it's going to have problems. So its immune system, it's not getting what it needs. So its immune system is going to be compromised. And when you have something that has an immune system that's compromised, you're going to have increased disease or insect problems. Same thing goes with a human. If you're not well because you're dealing with a heart condition or something else that's going on, you're more susceptible to disease. Not insects, but you are more susceptible to disease. So you have to kind of keep that in mind and try to keep those plants where they're supposed to be. Sun scald on shade-loving plants. I've seen hydrangeas planted in a sunny parking lot and in a tiny little island in the middle of a parking lot. Those things are not going to live very long. They're going to die. They're going to die because one, they're not going to get the moist soil that they need, and two, too hot for those things, and probably worst of all, three, they're a shade plant. They are not a sun plant. Most of them aren't. So they're going to get, their poor little leaves are going to get sun. Sorry, I've got a gnat flying around. Their poor little leaves are going to get sun scald and they're going to eventually die, go into decline and die. They're probably not going to make it through a summer down here. So put them where they're supposed to be. Look, if you don't have the information on the pot, just look it up. Super simple to do that these days. If you're in the nursery, you want to make sure that you're putting them in the right spot. Increased need for water. So some plants are moisture lovers and they want to be moist all the time. And some of them just need that initially when they're getting settled in their new spot. And that first year and a half that you're getting those plants established, they need to have consistent water. After that, they might be very drought tolerant. But if you're putting the wrong plant, if you're putting a plant that loves to be near water or in water into a really dry area, it's not going to do well. It's probably going to die. And competition for nutrients. If you're putting too many plants in the same spot, or you're putting heavy feeders in the same spot, and they're too close together, they're going to compete for nutrients. They're probably not going to do well. Again, that's another reason why they can go into decline, because they're competing for nutrients and they can't get what they need to do well. Okay, so plants you should avoid. Obviously, avoid this one. It's poison ivy. Nobody needs that. In fact, I sit here wondering why in the world that was actually created, because it's poison ivy. I'm very allergic to it. So I don't know. There's probably some reason out there. Birds eat the berries. But other than that, I don't know. Okay, so problem plants. This is the red tip photinia. So for those of you who've lived here in the Atlanta area for, I would say 25, 30 years, 30 years probably, you might remember that this was a very popular landscape plant back then. So most new subdivisions that were built had these red tip photinias in them. They grew very tall. They were kind of a great hedge. They looked pretty, and otherwise known as red tips, and were just crazy popular in the nurseries. Unfortunately, after they'd been here, it was probably about 25 to 30 years ago, we started to see a disease called entomophosphorum leaf spot. Now, most leaf spots are not going to kill the plant that they're on. They might cause some minor defoliation, but it doesn't really, I guess, benefit that disease to cause the plant, its host plant, to die. But this one did. So initially, because they were so heavily used in the landscape industry, a lot of them died right off the bat. I had one in my neighborhood that finally died. It was 2 years ago. You could see the decline. For whatever reason, this neighborhood was built in '95, so it was right before the big craze. And this one was a lone red tip, and it hung on for quite a while, but it finally bit the dust. So you want to try to make sure that you stay away from plants that have issues. You want plants that are hardy, you want plants that are well suited to the location they're at, and you don't want them to die quickly like these. Oops. Another problem plant, the euonymus. Not all of them are bad, but some of them are. You can get powdery mildew on these things, and they're very susceptible to scale. I'm going to call my mom out here. She's on here. She had a hedge of these alongside of her house, and there was a really bad infestation of scale, and it moved really fast. I was shocked at how fast that scale worked through her shrubs. I mean, after like a day and a half, it already worked over one or two of her shrubs. These were old original shrubs to the landscape. And it looked horrible. It did. So she had them ripped out, and now she's got raised beds on that side of the house. But they're very prone to scale. So, you know, try not to think about using these. You can still find them in the nursery industry. They haven't been outlawed, but there's better things out there that you can purchase. Natives or exotics. So you've got a native azalea at the bottom. Again, these things love understory. They don't like being out in the sun. So dappled sunlight, I've got them all around my house because I'm in a woodland setting and they love it. They're very beautiful. But you have to be careful and not put them out in full sun. They're not a full sun plant. You have dogwoods. Again, there's all sorts of plants out here that do perfect in certain situations. And some, like you see the Bradford pear that we all regret planting so many years ago, but you can still buy them in the nursery industry. States like South Carolina have actually outlawed them, but Georgia has not. And so you can still buy them and people still buy them. I don't know why. Still kind of wondering that myself. After about 30 years, they start to break apart. They have a very poor trunk structure, very upright growth, and they're just a bad all-around tree. And they have other problems as well. So, you know, it just makes sense to find things that have been proven to do well where you live. All right, dogwoods. So we have a couple kinds that we use here. Flowering dogwood is native. Those are an understory tree, and they do very well here in Georgia in the understory, and very pretty trees. But a lot of people want to put them out in their front yards that are very, very sunny. And that's not necessarily a good idea. They don't do well in a very heavily sunny situation. So they're going to struggle, and you're probably going to find they're not going to live their full lifespan. You'll have a lot of dead branches. We can have the Cornus cusa or cusa dogwood that looks very similar to the flowering dogwood, and they are much more tolerant of sun. So that's probably going to be your better choice for a tree if you really, really want a flowering dogwood tree in your front yard that gets a lot of sun. So just do your homework and figure out which particular variety is going to do best in the situation that you have. And you may end up in a situation where you've planted something and had some regrets later. So here we have the Chinese and Japanese wisterias. They're beautiful. And admittedly, when I first moved to Georgia many, many, many years ago, I would look out there in the spring and go, wow, that's so pretty. Look at those, except they're crawling over everything, choking out other trees and causing all sorts of problems. So they are not good to plant. There are some types of wisteria that are bushing types, and you can put on some type of a trellis. That should be fine. But yeah, we don't particularly care for the vining types that crawl up the trees and just basically crowd everything out. They're just pretty kudzu. And it's a little kind of funny because kudzu also has purple flowers very similar to the wisteria. So maybe they're kissing cousins. I don't know. I know they're not, but you can think about that way. So this is a gold medal winner. This is one of those bushing types. So the Amethyst Falls wisteria, it's a Native American wisteria, less aggressive, easier to manage. This is one that's also deer and drought tolerant. So it's one that if you want those pretty purple flowers, this is going to be much more manageable. So just make sure that you're looking for the correct wisteria, and that's Amethyst Falls. So some other things to consider when you're selecting woody ornamentals. So low maintenance, is that something that you want? I'm a big fan of that. I don't have a lot of time, so I don't want to have to be out in my landscape managing, pruning, fertilizing, watering, all of that stuff. Some people like that, and if you can do that and that's something that you want, you know, go for it. Me, I don't have the energy to do that anymore. What you see here is a couple of rocks, and you see the liriope in there that looks like a grass. It's lily turf. There's a lot of different words that it goes by. I have some of that. Does a great job at erosion control, and it can tolerate very dense shade. So if you're looking for a lawn alternative in a dense shade situation, this stuff is perfect. You can go over it and cut it like grass in some ways, or just let it grow. There's dwarf mondo grass, which is very similar. There's a lot of options out there. So if don't feel like you have to give in and cut some trees down or something like that, it's just a matter of figuring out what's going to fit in your landscape. Questions to ask yourself for those low maintenance landscapes. Do you like to prune? Do you need to spray for bugs and disease? I don't particularly care for that. How much fertilizer and water is it going to need? Do you have to just do a lot to it to keep it happy? And what about weeds and deadheading? So maybe you like a lot of flowers. That's a lot of work if you want to keep them actually blooming. So you have to kind of keep those thoughts in mind when you're trying to pick out what you want. Possible low maintenance selections. So let's take a look at some stuff that will do well here. So dwarf crimson barberry. So this is a deciduous plant. It's going to lose its leaves every year, but it does have some pretty fall color. It's very tough once it's established. So after that first establishment period, it'll be about 3 by 3, so not terribly big, and you'll get some nice arching branches. You can prune it, but it doesn't really have to be pruned. And there are lots of, I guess, pretty colors in foliage. Pygmy crimson, rose glow, those are pretty popular, easy to find. It's a full sun lover, so if you have a sunny front yard, this is one of the plants that you could definitely look into planting. But there are other options out there. So if you have, not much space, there are some that are like 16 inches tall, and there's some that go up to 6 feet tall. So there's all sorts of different sizes in there, different foliage colors, greens, yellows, purplish reds, that kind of stuff. And some of them have pretty little yellow flowers with bright red berries. So different seasons of color and interest, and some wildlife interest as well. And here's another example of the yellow. This is aura, A-U-R-A, like the aurora borealis, but it's a gold one. Japanese holly. This is a popular one just because it's very tough and versatile. And this one is a compacta, which means it's pretty small. It's going to be like 3 to 4 feet wide by tall. But be aware, there are some that are up to 15 feet tall. Those might be suitable for a hedge. So just kind of keep that in mind because hollies are pretty popular and easy to find. So this one might be an option for a sunny location that you're trying to screen out some annoying neighbors. Yelpone hollies. So Ilex vomitoria, this is actually a a tea. You can make a tea out of it. Excuse me. It's a native evergreen, very drought tolerant once established. Doesn't need a whole lot of maintenance once it is established again. And it'll produce these red berries that you see there. That's great for wildlife. And, you might need to prune it a little bit so that it keeps the shape of whatever it is that you're looking for. So, if you put a lot of them together, that you might need to do a little bit of pruning, but it could be a good backdrop to a now shorter hedge if you want to do that. And they're pretty tolerant of light conditions, so full sun to kind of light shade. Junipers, so these particular plants need full sun and they do not like wet feet. They're very drought tolerant once established. So these are something that landscapers choose a lot of. I have a neighbor on the corner. He's got a sloping yard. He has about 15 of these that he's planted that are now mature height, look very nice. But he was having problems with a lot of erosion on his Bermuda grass, and he was getting really irritated with it. So he decided to just forget about the Bermuda and he put these in and they look fantastic. And he doesn't have to do anything to them. They're very happy there. But they have to be well drained. And as I said before, full sun. And they can get pretty tall, 7 by 7 feet. So make sure that wherever you put them, that they are, in a spot that they can grow to full size. We don't want to have to get calls to extension saying, do I need to rehab this landscape and rip it out? Or what should I do? The Pfister juniper, that is going to, and I'm going to show you here. I think that's on the next one. That one can get a little taller, but looks very similar in size. So, so here you can see junipers kind of all have a similar growth pattern. But again, these are another very popular one for landscapers. They love these, and very low maintenance. Just don't plant it someplace where it's going to get wet. Whoops. You get some other selections like blue rug, sorry, Bar Harbor, Serengeti's Shore, Blue Pacific. These can spread 6 to 10 feet at full when they're fully grown. And they're great for a lot of the subdivisions around here where you have a lot of hills, maybe have an exposed bank, and you don't want to have to cut the grass. So these are a very good selection for something like that. Hollywood juniper. So here we have kind of a really odd looking juniper. I don't see these around a lot. You have to kind of go to some of the more specialized growers to get them. And this is kind of a really twisting, spiraling, weird looking juniper that would make a really good specimen plant. You could also do a bunch of these for some type of a hedge. They're a little bit slower growing, so they're probably not as popular for that, but about 30 feet high by about 10 to 12 feet. And just very interesting. So would work well in a Japanese garden. All right, shady areas. So a lot of us have that. I have a shady garden. I don't have a whole lot of sun at all. I have most of what I can grow here has to be pretty tolerant of shade. So do you have full shade, partial shade, or somewhere in between? We get that a lot of times. We get that question. And that's a really good question. So short of going outside and standing there at different hours of the day to count how many hours of sunlight you're getting, what should you do? Well, you can get one of these. So this is actually a kind of a sunlight monitor. So you put this thing in the ground and it actually counts the number of hours of sunlight that you get per day. You can get this off Amazon. Or wherever your favorite place is, Amazon, you can buy anything on Amazon. So if you really don't want to stand out there, you just have no idea, or you just moved there and you're not sure, you can get one of these and it will tell you how many hours of sunlight you have per day. So English laurel, there's several different cultivars of English laurel here that will grow here. And again, if you have questions about which ones you should plant, I can give you some varieties. But Otto Lucan, Zabeliana, Those do pretty good here. And they have this kind of semi-compact upright growth habit. You can see that in the top left. It'll be spreading 6 to 8 feet, and it's about up to 4 foot high. So this is a nice shrub to kind of put as a backdrop and maybe some flowers in the front. It's going to prefer shade and a lot of air movement. So don't put these too close together. If you put them too close together, you're going to end up with a fungus, which causes shot hole on the leaves. So we want to kind of avoid that. It's very humid here, and it's a hotbed of disease in Atlanta. Can't say that enough. So that's why we want to always make sure that we're planting the proper spacing to get between all of these. Florida anise tree, Elysium floridanum. Very pretty, and you're going to see Calycanthus, the sweet shrub, very similar looking, and kind of similar just all around, both in flower and then shape. So this is a native. It's an evergreen shrub. Have it in moist wooded areas. I have some here in my garden. We actually sell these in the plant sale at Extension in the spring. A lot of times we'll sell these. They're very pretty, have kind of a licorice smell if you crush one of the leaves. So very pretty, and they will grow rather tall. I think I've seen them 15, 20 feet tall, but a nice woodland garden type plant. You can have some winter injury if you're up into the mountains, so probably keep them down here and on down south. Japanese camellia or japonicas. So these guys are the bigger ones, and I always kind of think of, you've got the japonicas and the sasanquas. So most people, they bloom at slightly different times, and the way I always try to remember it is the sasanqua, September sasanqua. So that'll be the next one you look at, but they'll start blooming then, whereas these particular camellias are going to bloom a little bit later. So December, January, February. They're going to be evergreens. They'll have flowers that are white, pink, rose, red. You might have doubles. You can have some that are variegated, like you see here. Very pretty and a very good landscape plant, just a good staple to have. They get very tall, so you might put them in the back kind of as a screening plant. I have one outside my deck here, and it always has really pretty flowers in late winter. And then you have sasanquas. So similar again in color of the flower and the double flower. It can require a little bit more winter protection, but not much. They're kind of almost interchangeable here. Still beautiful leathery green leaves. And, it really depends on the flower color, but I have both in my landscape. Cubas. So I have these also, and they're very pretty. I have gold dust I have them several places in my yard. They're very slow growing, and I mean very, very slow growing. I have a small one that I got, 20 years ago, and it's only now maybe 6 foot wide by 5 foot tall. So very, very slow growing, but very pretty. Very good shady cultivar, and something that will do well in deep shade. And again, you can get some like the gold dust and some of the others that have white and yellow flecks, and it does a lot of, it adds some color to the shade. Hydrangeas. So hydrangeas, there's a variety of hydrangeas that are out there. You have some that are white, you have some that are green, you have some that are pink and yellow, pink and blue, depending on the pH of the soil. There's something for everybody. You have some that you have to trim or prune in the summer, some that you can prune in the spring, all sorts of different ones, but I love them. I have a lot of oak leaves hydrangeas in my own landscape, and some other lace caps and things like that. So here we have big leaf and lace cap hydrangeas, and very popular, very easy to find. Their flower buds are going to be formed on the previous season's growth. So you should prune it during the summer after it's done blooming. That way it'll have time to grow and then overwinter, and then next year you will have flowers. If you prune it in the spring, you're not going to get flowers. So, there's always the question of when do I prune? In this case, prune it after it's done flowering in the summer. And this one, the Penny Mac. That was weird. Different transition there. This one, flowering on new wood, early bloomer, blooms the second time. So you have, some new plants here. This particular presentation, I believe Dr. Durr worked on a little bit. So that's why we have the endless summer hydrangea in there. Paniculata hydrangeas. So this is prefers some part shade, but will tolerate a little bit more sun. So this one might be something that you could have in not a brand new subdivision, but one that, you have some trees that are starting to attain some decent size. And they're a little bit more drought tolerant than some of the other hydrangeas. So they may be a good option for that. Now, they're not going to get fancy colors for you, but they are very pretty. And they do make great cut flowers. Oakleys, these are my favorite, my personal favorite. They are a native to Georgia, Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi. They get really big. The records say 7 feet, but I have them taller than this. Generally in full shade situations, they will reach, so they will actually get bigger than that. But if you have them in more sun, they will stay smaller. They'll have these beautiful showy white flowers. You can see that just in these big drifts. Don't really prune them. They look much better when you kind of allow them to do their own thing. There are some dwarf cultivars out there, and there are some, there's one Ruby Slippers, I believe, that's red. So it's very pretty. And if you can find it and you're lucky, I tried to buy one and it was still the same color. Somebody mislabeled it. So kind of sad about that, but I guess I'll have to try again. Japanese plum yew. This is a gold medal plant, very drought tolerant, just kind of a different look. I have one of these that are kind of out back. It's very interesting. It has these really interesting, weird reddish brown seeds. You can see there how they grow along the stem of the yew, and it's very low maintenance. So if you're looking for low maintenance, it is a good one to look at. And plants can be either male or female. The flowers on the female, obviously, and they'll have a little bit of a different look. They'll tolerate morning sun, but they don't like hot and dry. So if you've got a brand new sunny yard, these aren't going to be a good selection for you. Rhododendrons, a lot of people think of these as plants that you would find up in the mountains, and they're really not wrong. You can find some in and around here in microclimates if you have kind of a moist, cool stream bed or something like that. You can get away with growing these, but they're not going to do well in a sunny situation. They need moist, well-drained soil, but not too wet, kind of what you would see up in the mountains. And that's where you're going to see a lot of them. Catawba rhododendrons. So these are very hardy and native, wild from the Allegheny Mountains all the way in through Georgia and Alabama. So these can get 6 to 10 feet with a spread of 5 to 8 feet, and they have pretty purple flowers, sometimes other colors, but very pretty. And again, so these are going to be more what you would think of in the mountains, but you certainly can find them in microclimates. There are actually a few people that have them around in here because we've got several streams that run through the neighborhood. Sweet shrub, calycanthus. So this is actually the one, like the Florida anise or an anise, however you want to call it, very similar in what they look like. So slightly different in how they smell. Also can be called Carolina allspice or strawberry shrub. Bubby blossom. Spice bush is probably what some of you may know it as. But it's a native to the southeast. So it can grow about 9 feet tall, 6 to 12 feet wide. Grows in a really wide range of soil conditions. So, but very pretty and definitely a good understory plant, similar to its I don't want to call it a sibling, but to the Florida anise or anise. Native deciduous azaleas. These are my favorites. So you have flame azaleas, our flamium. You have our rhododendron atlanticum, our canensis, and they have so many more. If you're interested and you want to know a little bit more about them, that QR code will actually take you to a publication called Native Azaleas for Alabama. And they have really nice pictures of all the different native azaleas. And you can see all the different colors, and they'll tell you a little bit about each of them. But generally, these are found all the way from Pennsylvania down through Florida. They can be 3 feet to 15 feet, and they can spread equally that far, or that, you know what I'm saying. They can spread that wide also. Colors, pinks, whites, oranges. I think I mentioned that before in contrast with the Asian azaleas. But they're beautiful. I love these. And so you can get, depending on elevation, you can get these flowering in May, early May, April, all the way through June, and just really gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous colors. So I probably have about 15 of them on my property because I love them so much. They're one of my favorites. Clethra, summer sweet clethra. These are a good pollinator plant. I'm going to probably try to have to zoom along here. I've got a lot of plants to go through. I'm not going to make it through all of these. You may have to if you want to get the rest of these. I'll probably run up to about 7 o'clock, and then I'll cut it and answer some questions. I apologize for that. This is a good pollinator plant, 4 to 8 feet, about 4 to 6 feet wide. And this is a popular one in your landscape if you're looking to help the pollinators out. It was cultivated all the way back in the 1700s. It's been very popular. You can find it down in Callaway Gardens and Pine Mountain. And there are different colors. So if you don't want just white, there are some pink ones, ruby spice, pink spires, Fern Valley pink, if you are looking for something that's a little bit different. But because it's a native, it's well adapted here. All right, plants for dry, forsythia. This is a really good choice. I love these in the spring. They are very hardy, so you can plant them anywhere. I've seen them in full sun. I've seen them in shade. I've seen them in wet. I've seen them in dry. They always have these beautiful yellow flowers. They can get big. I don't like it when I see them pruned down to a hedge, but I've seen that. They don't bloom near as well, but if you just let it do its thing, it will grow 10 feet tall, 12 feet wide. You can get variegated foliage. They're just a good old heritage type plant that we all kind of think about in the spring, and they do really well here. So these are a good choice. Butterfly bush. I am a fan of some of the shorter pugster varieties. Those are like 3 feet tall. And those are a good choice for your landscape if you don't have a lot of space, because they're very compact, 3 foot by 3 foot, give or take. You have some of the older heritage varieties. Got to be careful with those because they will seed readily. But they are a popular plant in the landscape. The chase tree or vitex, we sell this one along with the buddleias, the butterfly bushes. These kind of do well if you don't want to put a butterfly bush in your landscape. These look very similar, and you can train them into trees. They have that interesting kind of twisted trunk. Very pretty, and will do really well in a full sun situation. So not so, they're a little cold, not quite as cold hardy up in the mountains, but they do well here. Knockout rose. This is one that was very popular when it first came out 20, 30 years ago. We've had a little rosette issue. They were in a lot of landscapes, and because there were so many of them around, the rosette disease, that virus, transmitted to them very easily. So they a lot of times had to be ripped out of the landscape. So But if you don't have it in your neighborhood, they do have some beautiful varieties now: pinks, yellows, reds, double flowers, single. I still have quite a few up at my mailbox, and they're very pretty. Just require light pruning and deadheading, and they will bloom very happily for you. Loropetalum, or the Chinese fringe flower. I love to let these kind of ramble on their own size. They can get very huge, but you can also have smaller ones, and they thrive in full sun. They're very happy, and you'll get these beautiful pink or white flowers. You can get variegated foliage. You can get the burgundy foliage. There's a lot of different colors and height varieties. So think about these when you're trying to think about landscape plants that don't need a lot of water. They're very, very forgiving plants. American beautyberry and the Japanese beautyberry. So the Japanese, you'll get both the purple and the white berries, and then you have the American beautyberry, the Calicarpa americana. So those are harder to find, and a lot of people think they have the American variety, but they don't. They have the Japanese. Still, birds love them. They're very easy keepers once they're established, and they will get nice and big, and they'll have these beautiful berries in the fall. The birds absolutely love them, and they can tolerate some shade. So they're pretty, again, forgiving for that. The cranberry bush, don't see this a ton. I don't see it called this a ton. It's a viburnum, and it'll have these red berries that the birds will like. So, mostly it's about the fall foliage and the color, but you get these beautiful white flowers. And I'll kind of poke through here with, I got to speed it up. Chinese snowball, viburnum. So this is going to look a little bit more like a hydrangea, but it's got these big, puffy little snowball flowers. It's a gold medal winner. And again, I can get you some more information on these. So I'm just going to kind of zoom through these so that you can kind of see. And again, you're always welcome to reach out to me. I talked a little bit too much on the front end. Summer snowflake. And then we've got crepe myrtles, of course. Those are all over the place in the landscape here in and around the metro area. Rosa Sharon, this is a popular one. Some of them do seed. So just be aware of that. And plants for damp areas, Virginia sweetspire. This is, again, another good pollinator plant. You'll see this a lot around ponds, streams, that kind of thing. Fothergilla, this is another pollinator plant. Beautiful fall foliage. I have some of these in my landscape, and we sell these at the plant sale. Very pretty. Love these, and great for pollinators. We don't see these as much anymore, the Florida leucothic. Don't know why we don't see this anymore or as much as we used to, but it prefers shade and cool. So you might find it around like a stream area, that kind of thing, right on the edge of a woodland area. Inkberry, we see this fairly often. Native shrub found in kind of moist, swampy areas. Red buckeye, love buckeye. The pollinators love it too. If you can find some of this and plant it in your yard, the pollinators will thank you. But very pretty in the spring because of the red flowers. Other plants: Rosa Sharon, butterbush, clethra, witch hazel. Not the wax myrtle so much. We're a little out of its range here. Plants for screening: Cleara. Again, this looks a little bit like the red tip photinia, but it is not. It's different. It can get up to about 15 feet tall, so this could be a hedge. Nellie R. Stevens holly, again, a good hedge type holly, and it's got some red berries. You've got the Burford holly, dwarf Burford, little gem magnolia. This one doesn't get very big, so it's a very good foundation planting, although it can get up to 30 feet, but of course that's a lot shorter than its cousin, the southern magnolia. Rotunda holly, very easy to take care of, a very good street plant. Wintergreen barberry, and then we've got foundation plants, 1 to 5 feet tall. You've got the dwarf Yopon holly, Nana. This is a good one for a street plant. glossy abelia. Abelias are great for pollinator plants. They're very showy. You can get variegated. You can get white, white and purple, pink blossoms, and very showy flowers May to June. Pollinators love them. Love, love, love. Spirea, this is a popular one all the way from the Midwest down here. You can get different colors, different foliage. You can get variegated. You can get burgundy. You can get green. You can get pink. You can get red. You can get white flowers. I mean, just all sorts of colors. It can become a little weedy along streams and ponds when it gets too wet, but it's usually okay in a suburban yard situation. Blue rug juniper, again, these are great on hillsides. Very low maintenance, very, very low maintenance. Helleri holly, this is pretty easy to grow in full sun. Does need good drainage, just like junipers and other hollies. Very small, kind of a roundish meatball, natural meatball, I will call it. So a good foundation planting. And then you have the Indian hawthorn. This one, not so much. We lost a lot of them in the really cold winter we had, not this one, but the previous one. So you need to be a little further south. I would say if you're down by Macon area, it's probably good. But, you know, every so often we're going to have a really harsh winter and we're going to lose them. And we did lose a lot. Plus they have some issues with insects. So you just have to be careful. Japanese holly, again, it's a good boxwood substitute. You can see it looks quite a bit like the boxwood, and it's used kind of interchangeably these days. False cypress, we see these, some of especially the kind of yellowish chartreuse color that you have down there. Very pretty. We sold that one year. Fragrance, jasmine, that's a gardenia. You know, some of these interesting names. Confederate jasmine and Lady Banks rose. I have one of these, very pretty, thornless. Winter daphne. And again, don't worry if you're interested in getting more information. I can provide notes on these. I'm happy to do that. Slender deutzia. This is a very pretty, very showy, showy plant. Very gorgeous. And fragrant tea olive, another one we sell, very pretty, very fragrant, and insects love it. And that's basically it. I whizzed through it. So I'm going to leave that up, but I'm going to pull up the plant or the chat. And so if you were kind enough to hang around, I will go through and look at the questions now. Let's see. City of Milton has Lelands on their do not plant list. If you do and they find out about it or see it, there'll be a fine. Good for them. Lelands have all sorts of issues, bugs, growth, falling over. They're very shallowly rooted. They have all sorts of problems. So that's an interesting factoid. Good for Milton. Let's see. What plant was that last one? I'm not sure what that was in relation to. Though we do have native wisteria. Yeah, I did talk about that.
That was euonymus.
Huh? Oh,
My
euonymus.
euonymus that got scale.
Yes. Yeah, I did. It was sad. That was my mom. Let's see. Did you say there was a hydrangea with green blooms? Yes. It's actually the cultivar. It's Froggy goes a courtin. I actually have I have one. I won one at I think one of the Master Gardener meetings, and Froggy goes a courtin. I think that's what it is. And it actually has blooms that have these, they're green and they have white circles. And so they have multiple different stages. So they'll come out like that and they'll hold that particular flower head for a period of time. And then they finish flowering, they come out and have pink flowers. So they're really interesting looking, and I don't know, they kind of remind you of Kermit the Frog, which is probably why they're called Froggy Goes a Courtin. But yeah, very interesting. You can probably look that up. Did you say we were out of the range for southern wax myrtle? No, we're not out of the range. I recommend planting them in sheltered locations if you're going to do that. They do okay. I think, Mom, don't you have some? I think you do. Hers are actually quite big, so it just kind of depends. I wouldn't put them in full sun unsheltered, I guess, if you're going to look at it that way. A lot of stuff that isn't going to be something that would be happy in your neighbor's yard might be happy in your yard if you have a little microclimate or slightly different growing conditions. So that's why I always encourage people, do your research, look up to see that particular plant. There's a lot of publications out there written by Extension. You can, always look up a particular plant and you can see if it does well in the Southeast. If you're not real, interested in doing a lot of that research yourself, you can always give us a call at Extension and we can let you know if they've done well here or if we have problems with them. We see a lot of pictures that come in of diseased plants, problems with plants and different turf and other things like that. So we can tell you if we see trends like, no, don't plant that. You're going to have problems with that. Don't waste your money. And so we can help you kind of select some. So if you already have your plant list, if you want to do something, just give us a call or send us an email or something. We can tell you yes or no. That's a good thing. Let's see. Can you discuss renewal pruning and the best time to do it? Yes, renewal pruning. So if you have an older home and that older home comes with an older home's landscape, so you have some, let's say you have some gardenias that are huge, and you have some other landscape plantings that are blocking your bay window or something like that. Renewal pruning is basically when you have this huge shrub that's out of control in size because somebody put it in there and wasn't thinking about the maximum size it could attain. And so what you're going to do, the best time to do that is during the summer and preferably early summer if you can do that. And you can do it in a couple different ways. One, if you don't want your HOA to get angry at you, then the part that is facing the house, if it's in the front in a foundation planting, you basically take it down to about 18 inches and it's going to look really ugly, but take that back part down to about 18 inches, 18 to 20 inches, and let it go. And then what you'll note is that over the course of that summer, it will start to leaf back out again, and it will start to look more like it did when it was originally planted. And then next year, after that growth has had an opportunity to grow and kind of fill out, you can go in and then selectively remove. If you want to, you can drag it on for 3 years, but most people will do it either all at once or they'll do it in 2 years. Then you cut down the front part of that shrub to what you did the year before, so 18 to 20 inches. You have some growth in the back, so that kind of masks the branches in the front that don't have any vegetation on them. And then over the course of that summer, the second summer, that will then fill in. And then it will look very much like it did when it was originally put in, and you've just renewed your landscape. So you don't have to rip it out, start all over again. There's all sorts of literature out there online and videos on YouTube if you want to watch on how to do that. It hurts when you have to hack it back like that, but your plant, if you do that every so often, it won't be as leggy. It'll look a lot better, and then you'll be able to kind of keep up with it and do some selective pruning here going forward so that it doesn't get as out of control. Most plants are going to have plenty of nutrients in their root system that they can handle a renewal prune from time to time. It's just not something that you want to do every year. Just like with crepe myrtle, where people go up and hack the top of their crepe myrtles off, the more often you do that, the more nutrients that plant has to pull from its root system to try to regenerate that growth that you just cut off. So that's why you don't want to do that often, and that's why you don't want to do that with crepe myrtles. Crepe myrtles, sorry. Can you recommend woody plant propagation methods? It really depends on the plant. Like for instance, hydrangeas. So you can actually buy these plastic spheres off Amazon, super cheap, and you put some sphagnum moss in there or some moist potting soil, and you just clamp them on some slightly newer wood, and then that plant will actually grow roots into that ball. You can check it periodically and then just snip it below there, pull it off, plant it. Boom, you've got a new hydrangea. works great. You can also lay a branch down and put a rock on top of it, and it will root into the soil. And you can then snip that and put that into a pot, and you got another plant. You can graft. A lot of times that's probably something more people think about with trees, but you can certainly do that with woody shrubs. Butterfly bushes, for instance, you can try it with that. Some of the magnolias, you can try it with that. And that goes well for if you have storm damage too. Like I have a magnolia out here, a deciduous one, and I had a tree limb fall on it. I grafted it back together, and it's happy, and it's just fine. So there's I think I have a propagation virtual presentation coming up later this fall. So maybe it's a lunch and learn. I'm not sure. Check the QR code on the left will have the events and classes going forward. So there is a propagation one. I know I did put one in there, but it'll talk about all the different methods of propagation that you can use. And it won't go into like super specifics about which plants to do it on, but you'll learn all about propagation methods and the proper way to do them. All right, let's see. I guess that's about it. So if anybody has any other questions, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, that's pretty much it for the evening. So I did record this, and it will be put up on the Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel, so that QR code is there if you want to watch that. There's everything else is there too that I've recorded in the past, so you can go check that out and get some more information. All sorts of cool stuff on there. I try to come up with new things, new topics all the time, and then of course we'll recycle some of the older stuff if you have questions. But if you want this slide deck, and again, that'll include the notes that are associated with it. So if you liked some of those particular choices of plants and you're thinking about putting them in your landscape, you can reach me at that email address there, lisa.klein@gwinnettcounty.com, and I will be happy to share all of that with you. So you can have a very handy slide deck that will give you all sorts of good information. So thank you so much. We appreciate you coming, and hopefully you will come to my future sessions. I try to do these twice a month. And I think I've got some extra lunch and learns in there next time around towards the fall to get those people that can't always be here at 6. So everybody have a good evening. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.